They sealed her in stone, but you can still hear her name in the wind over the Nile. She outwitted kings, seduced conquerors, and built a throne on silken steel, only to trade it all for one final act that would make her immortal. Tonight, we step into the tomb of the last pharaoh, and before we begin, tell me, where in the world are you watching from and what time is it there? Because once we open these doors, the legend of Cleopatra will follow you into the dark. The city is not yet awake, but the sea already whispers. Out beyond Alexandria's great harbor, the horizon is a thin blade of gold cutting into the dark. The Mediterranean stirs beneath it, shifting from black to bronze, as if molten metal were slowly being poured into the world. The masts of merchant ships sway like a forest in the wind, their sails furled, their decks slick with dew. From the Pharaohs lighthouse, the eternal flame still burns, its light sliding over water and stone. And above it all, crowning the shoreline, rises the palace of the Ptolemies. Its walls are pale as seashells, its roofs gilded so thickly that when the sun rises, they will blaze like fire. Even now, in the cool before dawn, the air inside is heavy, with incense of frankincense and myrrh, with the salt breath of the sea, with the faint metallic tang of bronze lamps guttering low. Through these halls walks Cleopatra VII. She moves without hurry, her bare feet silent against marble floors inlaid with lapis and gold. Silk veils trail behind her, catching the light of oil lamps. Upon her head sits the double diadem of Upper and Lower Egypt, a crown older than Rome itself. In the half-dark, the polished gold gleams like the eye of some ancient predator. To her people, she is not merely a ruler. She is Thea Philippator, the goddess who loves her father. She is the living embodiment of Isis, mother of Horus, protector of Egypt. Priests sing her name in temples. Fishermen murmur prayers to her image carved in ivory before they push their boats into the Nile. But to her rivals, she is something else entirely. They call her a serpent, graceful, silent, deadly, a creature that wraps itself around the heart until the squeeze becomes fatal. They speak of her beauty, yes, but always in the same breath they speak of her mind, sharper than a legion's spear. They fear her ability to make a man believe he is winning when she has already claimed the victory. Her reign has begun in a storm. Her father, Ptolemy XII, left her more than a crown. He left Egypt, drowning in debt to Rome. Debts not counted merely in coin, but in obligations, in compromises, in the erosion of sovereignty. Already Roman merchants have set up their stalls in Alexandria. Already Roman soldiers stand at the docks in the name of protection. And the threat is not only from without. Within the palace, the air hums with the quiet violence of family politics. Cleopatra shares her throne with her younger brother Ptolemy XIII, a boy in name, but one propped up by older men who whisper that Egypt should be ruled by a man, not a woman. These advisors, smelling her influence grow, are already laying snares for her. She knows this. She knows that power in Egypt is not built on marble, but on shifting sand. The throne is gilded, yes, but beneath the gold, its legs are cracked. If she stumbles, there will be no shortage of hands eager to pull her down. And yet, Cleopatra is not a woman who stumbles. Even now, in the silent corridors before dawn, she is at work. She passes by walls carved with the stories of gods: Osiris resurrected, Isis grieving, Horus avenging. She runs her fingers along the cool grooves of the stone. Every line is a reminder. Egypt has survived conquerors before. Survival is an art, and she is its master. Her beauty is armor, but her intellect is the weapon. She speaks the languages of her court and her people, of scholars and merchants, of envoys from kingdoms far to the east and the senators of Rome. Unlike her predecessors, she does not hide behind translators. She knows that a phrase spoken in a man's own tongue can disarm him more swiftly than a drawn blade. This is her paradox, and her greatest strength. She must be adored, yet feared. She must appear vulnerable, yet never be exposed. She must bow low enough to make others think they tower over her, but never so low they forget she is a queen. In the marketplace, a fisherman might see her stop to speak with an old woman selling figs, the queen's hand resting lightly on the vendor's shoulder as she listens. In the palace, a Roman envoy might find himself nodding along as she makes him believe her ideas were his all along. And when she leaves either one, both will feel as though they have been honored. But make no mistake, she remembers every face, every word, every favor, given or denied. Her palace is not merely a home. It is a hive buzzing with servants, courtiers, spies, and informants. Some serve her willingly, others serve her without knowing it. Through them, she learns what she needs to know. Which senator in Rome has overextended his debts? Which general's son has gone missing in the deserts near Cyrene? Which of her own courtiers is quietly selling grain to her enemies? Still, she feels the pressure tightening. Rome's interest is growing. Their hunger is rarely sated by trade alone. The Senate debates not if Egypt should fall into their grasp, but when. And somewhere in the marble halls across the sea, men are already discussing whether Cleopatra will be an obedient client queen or an obstacle to be removed. Outside her chamber windows, the city begins to wake. The calls of dock workers rise with the light. The clatter of amphorae echoes against the stone quays. Priests in the temples burn offerings to Ra as the first rays of sun catch the tips of the palace columns. And with that light, the sea bursts into brilliance, a mirror of gold, dazzling, almost blinding. Cleopatra turns her gaze westward toward the invisible shores of Italy. She can feel the pull from across the water, the force of a city whose ambition stretches farther than the Nile's flood, whose legions march farther than the desert winds. She knows they will come for her, and she knows that when they do, she must already be ready, armed not with more soldiers than they can muster, but with something far rarer, the ability to turn their own hunger into her survival. For now, the queen stands in the light of morning, serene, untouchable, but the harbors hold more than merchants. Beyond the curve of the coast, Roman warships wait like vultures riding the thermals, patient, unblinking. The serpent is coiled, the eagle is circling, and between them lies the Nile, deep, ancient, and soon to be stained with the blood of kings. The first strike will not come from Rome's legions, but from within her own family. And when it does, it will force her to choose, to yield the throne, or to fight for it with every weapon she possesses. The lotus blooms quietly in the gardens of the palace, its petals soft as silk, its scent drifting in the warm summer air. To the untrained eye, it is only a flower, but Cleopatra knows the truth. The lotus is Egypt's symbol of rebirth, beauty that floats serenely on water while its roots twist deep into the mud. It is the perfect emblem for her reign, luminous on the surface, bound to something dark beneath. She sits on the lotus throne beside Ptolemy XIII, her younger brother, and her husband in name only. The marriage is a formality, an old Ptolemaic tradition meant to preserve the bloodline. The alliance is a performance for the people, a charade of unity played out in the public eye. Behind the scenes, it is a cold war of siblings. In the court's echoing halls, every feast is a battlefield. Gold platters gleam beneath torchlight, laden with roast lamb and honeyed figs. But the air is thick with the unspoken. Courtiers raise their cups in toasts, yet their eyes dart sideways, measuring the distance to the nearest ally, the nearest exit. Servants move silently between the guests, refilling goblets and replacing dishes, yet each step is measured, each glance calculated. In Alexandria's palace, Even the act of pouring wine can be an act of war. The music plays on, lyres and flutes weaving melodies over the low hum of conversation. But Cleopatra hears the undertone beneath it. Whispers sliding through marble corridors, promises made in half-light, the rustle of papyrus bearing names that might one day be found with throats cut. Her brother plays his part well. In public, he smiles, the charming young pharaoh whose hand rests lightly on hers when the crowds are watching. In private, he surrounds himself with older advisors who despise her. They see her as dangerous, too ambitious, too independent, too willing to speak her mind. And worst of all, they know she is winning the love of the people. Alexandria itself becomes a theater of betrayal. In the city's markets, rumors are planted like seeds. Cleopatra is said to favor foreign merchants over Egyptian ones, to fill the treasury with gold for her own pleasures while farmers starve. In the harbor taverns, drunken voices mutter that she dreams of ruling without her brother, that she has no loyalty to her family, only to herself. The Nile swells under the summer sun, carrying rich silt to the farmlands, promising another season of life. But in the palace, the flood is one of unrest. The undercurrent grows stronger with each passing week. Cleopatra knows the game. Her entire life has been a lesson in survival, not through force alone, but through outthinking those who would see her fall. She has inherited not only a throne, but a court built on shifting alliances. She has learned that in Egypt, power changes hands not just in battles, but in the quiet between them. At feasts, she speaks lightly, her voice carrying just enough warmth to soothe the doubtful and just enough wit to unnerve the overconfident. She studies her opponents the way a priest studies omens, watching the way they lean forward when they lie, the way their eyes flicker when they are calculating a risk. Her brother's advisors tighten their circle around him, feeding him half-truths and outright lies. They urge him to take more authority, to sign decrees without her consent, to place loyal men in key positions in the army. They whisper of her dangerous ambition, and Ptolemy listens. The tension is palpable. At one banquet, a visiting noble from Thebes presents the royal couple with a gilded lotus bowl filled with wine. Cleopatra drinks. Ptolemy drinks. Later that night, one of her most trusted handmaidens collapses after tasting the leftovers, her lips turning blue. She survives, barely. Cleopatra says nothing of it publicly, but in the privacy of her chambers, she has the bowl smashed to shards. The palace's beauty is becoming a cage. Every column, every tapestry, every statue of the gods is both protection and prison. Outside the palace walls, the city bustles with trade, philosophy, and invention. Inside, it is suffocating. A labyrinth of intrigue, where each corner hides an ear, and each ear belongs to someone with a dagger. And yet, across the sea, in the great marble halls of Rome, Cleopatra's fate is already being debated. The Senate watches Egypt closely. Reports arrive that the young queen is intelligent, ambitious, dangerous. Some senators argue she could be an ally worth cultivating, a buffer between Rome and other Eastern kingdoms. Others believe she should be removed before she becomes a problem. Rome's presence in Egyptian politics is not new, but it is growing bolder. Envoys arrive under the guise of trade negotiations, but Cleopatra knows they are gathering intelligence. Their eyes linger too long on the palace guards, the storehouses, the docks. She is not naive. She understands the paradox of her situation. Egypt's wealth is both her greatest weapon and her greatest vulnerability. It is the reason Rome covets her kingdom, and the reason they may one day destroy it. By late summer, the palace is divided into two courts, hers and her brother's. Some nobles walk a careful line between them. Others choose sides openly. Even the servants know which hallways to avoid depending on whose loyalty they claim. One evening, As the heat of the day fades into the cooler breath of night, Cleopatra walks alone in the palace gardens. The moonlight turns the lotus flowers silver. She reaches into the pool, lets her fingers trail over the petals, and thinks of the symbol's meaning. Rebirth. She knows she may have to lose everything to take it back again. Her thoughts are interrupted by the faint sound of footsteps. From the shadows emerges Apollodorus, one of her most trusted allies, a Greek soldier who has served her family for years. He kneels, head bowed, and delivers the news she has been expecting. Her brother's men are moving against her. The plan is already in motion. By morning, the palace will be his. Cleopatra will be removed from the throne, perhaps quietly exiled, perhaps more violently silenced, but they will not find her here when they come. Before dawn, she slips out of Alexandria with only a handful of loyal companions. They ride east toward the desert, leaving behind the jeweled chambers, the guarded gates, the life she has built. The air is dry and sharp, the sand stinging her skin. Ahead lies uncertainty, yet even in the darkness of exile, she feels the threads of her next move forming. This is not the end of her reign. It is the first act of a longer game. She knows she cannot defeat her brother with the few allies she has left in Egypt. She will need power greater than his, power that can break armies and unseat kings. Across the sea, there is such a man whose name makes even Rome's enemies hesitate, a man who commands legions, whose word carries the weight of law, Julius Caesar. If she can reach him, she might not only reclaim her throne, she might secure Egypt's future for a generation. The desert wind carries the scent of salt from the distant Mediterranean. Cleopatra looks toward the west, toward the lands of the eagle, and makes her choice. The queen will not wait to be hunted. She will choose her battlefield and her ally. The desert wind cuts like glass. It stings Cleopatra's eyes and drives fine grains of sand into her hair, her robes, her very skin. The city of Alexandria lies far behind her now, its marble columns and blue harbors hidden by miles of heat-hazed horizon. The road east stretches before her like a serpent, winding, treacherous, leading not to safety, but to survival. She rides in silence, her companions equally wordless. They know the stakes. One wrong turn, one whisper carried to the wrong ear, and there, Queen will be a hunted fugitive. But Cleopatra does not look like a woman in retreat. Even in exile, she carries herself like a monarch, chin high, gaze fixed, her mind already working 3 steps ahead. Power in Egypt is as old as the stone that built the pyramids. For centuries, it has been hoarded, guarded, inherited through bloodlines bound as tightly as the linen around a mummy. Pharaohs have ruled through spectacle, ritual, and the weight of divine authority. But Cleopatra wields power differently. She is not content to be a figure on a throne. She steps into the marketplace, into the temples, into the harbors where sailors curse the sun. She speaks to her people in their own tongue, the Egyptian of the farmers, the Greek of the scholars, even the Latin of the Romans. It is more than a political tactic. It is a weapon. The Ptolemies before her hid behind translators, filtering every conversation through layers of interpretation, turning dialogue into a performance rather than an exchange. But Cleopatra knows that power is built in the moments between words, in the way a merchant's face softens when she addresses him directly, in the flicker of trust that lights in a soldier's eyes when she answers his question without pause. This intimacy wins her loyalty, but also paints a target on her back. Her brother's advisors see it for what it is, a dangerous erosion of their control. If the people come to see Cleopatra as their ruler, not the dynasties, not the courts, then Ptolemy XIII becomes ornamental, and men who feel their power slipping will always reach for the knife. In Alexandria, the whispers against her sharpen. She is accused of overstepping her role, of plotting to remove her brother from the throne entirely. She is accused, absurdly, but effectively, of conspiring with Rome to sell Egypt's sovereignty. Her enemies understand that a lie repeated often enough will begin to feel like truth. The heat of summer presses in like a fist. The Nile runs high. The fields are green with the promise of harvest. But inside the palace walls, the air is suffocating. Factions gather in shadowed corners. Scribes forge decrees in her brother's name. Guards change allegiances overnight. The moment comes without warning. At dusk, the palace gates close under the pretext of security. Her private guard is disarmed, her allies barred from entering. A message arrives, unsigned but unmistakable. Leave now or face imprisonment. Cleopatra does not argue. She does not linger to gather treasures or plead her case. She moves swiftly, quietly. A loyal servant smuggles her out through a lesser gate used by gardeners, the smell of jasmine clinging to the air. She mounts her horse in the shadows beyond the wall and rides into the dark, her destination unspoken. Exile, she knows, is not defeat. It is a crucible. The desert is a harsh teacher. The days are white with searing light, the nights black and cold, the wind carrying the cries of unseen creatures. Cleopatra studies maps by firelight, tracing her finger over the coastlines of the Mediterranean. She considers her allies too few. She considers her enemies too many. And always her mind returns to the same truth. She cannot reclaim her throne alone. If she is to return to Alexandria, it must be with a force so decisive that her brother and his backers will not dare oppose her. That force does not exist within Egypt's borders. It lies across the sea, in the marble heart of the empire that already watches her kingdom with hunger. Rome. It is a dangerous thought. Rome has swallowed kingdoms greater than hers. To invite them in is to risk inviting chains. But she also knows that Rome is not a single beast. It is a den of predators, each fighting for dominance. If she can align herself with one, she may use his power against the others, and one name rises above them all. Julius Caesar, dictator of Rome, master of legions, a man whose ambition has redrawn the map of the known world. He is in Alexandria now, called by her brother's court to mediate the dispute between them. She knows this is a lie. Caesar has not come for justice. He has come for grain, for gold, for Egypt itself. But perhaps she can make him come for her. The thought takes root. It is not enough to meet Caesar. She must astonish him, intrigue him, leave him unable to imagine Egypt without her. She must arrive in a way that makes the court gasp, that makes her enemies stumble, that makes Caesar himself pause in whatever he is doing and turn to look. She begins to plan. Her companions think she will wait until her allies in the city secure a safe path to him. But Cleopatra knows there is no such thing as a safe path in politics. There is only the path you create for yourself. By the time they reach the outskirts of Alexandria, the plan is ready. She sends word to Apollodorus, her trusted ally still within the city. He will help her bypass the guards, bypass the court, bypass even her brother himself, and place her in Caesar's presence before anyone can stop her. The method is as dangerous as it is absurd. She will be smuggled into the royal palace rolled inside a carpet, a gift for the Roman general. It is a gamble that could end in humiliation or execution, but it is also the kind of gesture that will burn itself into memory. Cleopatra has studied Caesar from afar. She believes he will admire audacity. She believes he will see in her not just a queen, but a partner in ambition. In the stifling heat of her tent, she closes her eyes and sees the moment. The carpet unrolled, the gasp of the court, Caesar's eyes meeting hers. She does not see fear. She does not see defeat. She sees the beginning of something dangerous. For her brother, for Rome, perhaps even for herself. The desert wind outside moans against the tense canvas, a sound like the low voice of fate. Cleopatra does not flinch. One knows that from this point forward, every step she takes will draw her deeper into the coils of the Roman eagle. But she also knows that silk can bind as tightly as steel, and she intends to weave both around her enemies. When dawn comes, she rides toward the city she once ruled, toward the palace she once called home. The air smells of the sea again, of tarred ropes and fish and salt, and somewhere beyond the harbor walls, the masts of Roman ships rise against the sky. She does not slow. She is going back, not to plead, but to strike. And in the great hall of the palace, Julius Caesar waits, unaware that the viper of the Nile is already coiling toward him. The sea at night is a thing without mercy. It heaves and whispers beneath a sky so black it swallows the horizon. The oars of the small boat dip silently into the dark water, each stroke pulling Cleopatra closer to the city she once ruled and the palace from which she had been driven. Salt hangs heavy in the air, mingled with the faint scent of tar and wet rope. Somewhere beyond the harbor walls, she can see the glow of torchlight, guards pacing, ships rocking at anchor, Rome's banners stirring faintly in the wind. She comes not with an army, but with a gamble. There will be no siege, no battle lines drawn in the sand. Instead, she carries with her the most dangerous weapon she possesses: herself. The plan is as simple as it is absurd: to enter the palace as a gift. The man guiding her is Apollodorus, her loyal ally, whose broad shoulders and steady hands have carried her family's secrets for years. In the bottom of the boat lies the carpet, thick Syrian weave, the kind fit for a royal chamber. Its rolled form is tied with cord, appearing to be nothing more than a merchant's delivery. Hidden within, the Queen of Egypt waits. The crossing is short, but taut with danger. The slap of water against the boat seems too loud, the glint of torchlight too near. One shout from the docks, one curious guard, and the plan collapses. But luck, or perhaps something older and more divine, carries them through. The palace looms above them, its white stone catching the faintest silver of the moon. Apollodorus moves quickly, passing through side gates with a confidence born of long service. The guards know him. They glance at the carpet, but do not question. A gift for the Roman general, they are told. Inside, the air changes. It smells of cool stone, of extinguished lamps, of the faint musk of soldiers who have been quartered here for weeks. Rome has made itself at home in the heart of Egypt's palace. Footsteps echo in corridors once filled with the soft tread of eunuchs and scribes. Now the halls ring with the heavier stride of legionaries in bronze and leather. At last, they reach the chamber. The doors open, and Apollodorus sets the carpet on the floor before the man who has come to decide Egypt's fate: Julius Caesar. He is older than she expected, lines etched deep into his face, his hair cropped close, the weight of command evident in his posture. But his eyes are sharp, alert, the eyes of a man who measures value in an instant. Apollodorus unties the cord, the carpet unfurls, and Cleopatra spills forth like a vision from another world. She rises from the folds of fabric, the scent of desert myrrh drifting from her skin, her dark hair falling loose over her shoulders. She is draped not in the cumbersome regalia of her throne, but in a gown of deep crimson that clings like liquid shadow. Her bare feet touch the cold stone, and she meets Caesar's gaze without hesitation. In that moment, the chamber stills. Here stands a queen who has crossed the line between disgrace and legend in a single breath. Caesar, amused and intrigued, does not reach for a weapon. He studies her as one might study a rare artifact, not for beauty alone, but for craftsmanship, for the hidden strength beneath the surface. Cleopatra, for her part, sees the measure of him in those first seconds. A man who has worn the laurel of triumph, who has crossed rivers and mountains for glory, who sees kingdoms not as homes, but as pieces to be claimed. Their conversation begins quietly, but each word is a duel. She tells him of her exile, of her brother's treachery, of the court rotting under Rome's so-called protection. She does not beg. She offers. Egypt, the grain that will feed Rome's hungry poor, the gold that will pour into its coffers, the port that will guard its eastern trade. In return, she asks not for pity, but for partnership. His sword for her throne, his legions for her stability. Caesar listens, and for every offer she makes, he counters, not with refusal, but with terms. If he is to back her claim, Egypt will be more than an ally. It will be Rome's closest client, its wealth flowing toward the Tiber. Cleopatra accepts without flinching. She knows the price of survival. But alliances with conquerors are never equal. Caesar's smile is that of a man who has acquired a prize without lifting a blade. Yet Cleopatra's is the smile of one who knows that the viper can coil as tightly around the eagle as the eagle can grip the viper. By the time the torches burn low, the bargain is struck. Caesar will remain in Egypt to see her restored. His presence alone will cow her brother's supporters. His legions will crush any who resist. In return, Cleopatra will ensure that Egypt remains the jewel of Rome's crown, gleaming, compliant, but still hers to wear. Outside, the city sleeps, unaware that its fate has shifted in the span of an evening. The harbor is quiet, save for the slap of waves against hulls. But in the palace, the game has begun anew. Cleopatra has stepped back onto the board, and this time she plays with Rome's most formidable piece in her hand. Still, as she walks the corridors later that night, escorted now not by her own guards, but by Caesar's men, she feels the paradox closing in. She has regained the palace, but at the cost of letting the eagle roost in its halls. The marble under her feet is colder now, the shadows deeper. In the quiet of her chamber, she stands at the window and looks out over Alexandria. The city's domes and towers are silvered in moonlight, the scent of the sea drifting in through the open shutters. Somewhere beyond the dark water lies Rome, vast, restless, insatiable. She tells herself she can control this alliance, that she can steer Caesar's hunger toward her enemies and away from her crown. But she knows that every conqueror believes himself immune to the venom of the viper. For now, they are allies. For now, their ambitions align. But the wheel turns, and when it does, the same hands that lift her back to power may one day be the ones to tighten the noose. And as dawn approaches, the first clash of steel on the waters of Alexandria draws near. A fire that will consume ships, men, and history itself. The first strike is not a trumpet's call. It is the smell of smoke. At dawn, Alexandria's harbor lies under a pale, deceptive calm. The sea is glass, the gulls circle in lazy spirals, and the city still breathes the cool air of night. But on the far side of the docks, where the warships anchor in tight ranks, the wind carries a darker scent. Pitch, oil, and the faint, acrid taste of fire. Then the shouting begins. It spills down from the harbor walls into the streets, urgent, sharp, panicked. The clatter of boots on stone joins the calls, and moments later, the deep, primal roar of men in battle fills the air. Julius Caesar's troops have clashed with the forces of Ptolemy XIII. Steel against steel, shield against shield. The sound echoes off the marble facades like thunder trapped in a canyon. The harbor becomes a furnace. Caesar's orders are clear. Deny Ptolemy the sea. The Roman ships, smaller and swifter, dart between the heavier Egyptian vessels. Torches arc through the air, landing in rigging thick with tar. The flames spread with terrible speed, licking up sails, devouring masts. The heat surges outward, searing the faces of men still fighting on the decks. on the water, men scream, some from wounds, others from the sudden plunge into the black depths as their ships buckle and sink. The Nile's mouth turns into a graveyard of broken hulls and floating bodies. The river's current carries the wreckage slowly, almost lazily, toward the open sea, as if mocking the frenzy of the living. And then, in the confusion, disaster strikes somewhere far worse than the docks. The fire, leaping from ship to ship, finds new fuel along the waterfront. Warehouses, markets, and the annex of the Great Library of Alexandria. Inside those storerooms rest scrolls from every corner of the known world, the histories of vanished empires, the calculations of astronomers, the philosophies of entire civilizations. The papyrus, dry as desert grass, catches instantly. The flames race upward. The air fills with the sweet, sickening scent of burning parchment and ink. Ash begins to drift through the streets, tiny black flecks swirling against the white marble, carrying with them words no one will ever read again. The library's heart, the great central building, remains untouched, but the loss is still unimaginable. In the palace, Cleopatra watches from a high balcony. The smoke rises in two great plumes, one from the harbor, one from the library's quarter. The heat from the burning ships turns the air above the water into a rippling, distorted haze. She feels the sting of ash in her eyes, but her gaze does not waver. This is her city, her home, and now it is a battlefield. She moves quickly. Through the palace corridors, she summons those still loyal to her. Merchants, soldiers, priests, anyone with influence or resources. In the great hall, her voice carries above the din from outside. She speaks not as a woman cornered, but as a queen whose throne is worth bleeding for. She reminds them that Ptolemy is not the pharaoh Egypt needs, that his power rests not on love but on deceit, on the manipulation of men too young to understand the cost of betrayal. She promises protection, stability, and the return of order, if they stand with her now. The response is swift. Some come out of loyalty, others out of fear. But in the end, it does not matter. What matters is that they come. Outside the city, the war shifts. Ptolemy's forces, unable to hold the harbor, are pushed back toward the Nile. The river's banks, once a place of commerce and prayer, become killing grounds. Legionaries drive their enemies into the shallows, the water churning red around their ankles. The Egyptians fight with desperate courage, but without coordination, their lines breaking, their leaders falling one by one. Ptolemy XIII himself is said to be there, his golden armor gleaming under the harsh sun. Whether he fights to win or simply to escape is unclear, but fate, or perhaps the Nile's own will, has already chosen his end. In the chaos, his boat capsizes. Some say it is struck by enemy fire. Others claim it overturns as he tries to flee. Either way, the pharaoh vanishes beneath the black water. His armor, heavy with gold and jewels, drags him down. Witnesses say the last sight of him is a single hand breaking the surface before the river swallows him whole. When word reaches the palace, Cleopatra does not cheer. Her brother's death, though it clears her path to the throne, is still the death of a child she once knew, a boy who had been both family and foe. But there is no time for grief. The city still smolders, the people still whisper, and Rome still stands in her halls. By nightfall, the fighting ends. The harbor is a ruin of blackened timbers. The river is quiet again, its surface betraying no sign of the bodies resting below. The library's annex lies in ashes, the acrid scent still lingering in the air. And in the palace, Cleopatra is pharaoh once more. Her coronation is quiet, almost somber. The crown, heavy with gold and history, rests on her brow as Caesar looks on. He has kept his promise. She has kept hers. But the cost is plain. Egypt is hers again, but it is no longer free. The eagle's shadow falls across the Nile now, its wings spread wide, its talons sunk deep. The grain that once fed her people will feed Rome's hungry first. The gold that once adorned her temples will line Roman coffers. She tells herself she can live with this. That tethered power is better than no power at all. She will use Rome's strength to secure her rule, to rebuild her city, to heal the wounds of this war. Yet in the deepest chambers of her mind, she knows a truth she cannot speak aloud. Every gift from Rome is a chain, and chains, no matter how finely wrought, are still chains. For now she stands on the palace balcony once more, looking out at a city lit by the last embers of a day soaked in blood and ash. The wind carries the salt of the sea and the faintest whisper of the river's current. Somewhere beyond that horizon lies Rome, patient as ever. And soon, the tides will bring not just soldiers and merchants, but new players in this game, men whose ambitions will entwine with hers in ways that will change the course of empires. The Nile is swollen, rich and heavy with life. Its waters glimmer under the early sun, carrying silt and promise to the fields beyond the city walls. The air is sweet with the scent of blooming lotus and the faint tang of incense drifting from Alexandria's temples. On the broad streets, people gather in thick, expectant lines, their eyes drawn to the palace gates. The sound of drums grows steadily louder, a heartbeat for the city itself. Then she appears. Cleopatra, not merely as a queen, but as a goddess incarnate. Her skin catches the light like polished bronze. Her robes, woven with threads of gold, shimmer as she moves. Around her neck rests a wide collar of lapis, turquoise, and carnelian, each stone glowing in the sun's embrace. Upon her brow, the horned crown of Isis, mother of kings, protector of Egypt. In her arms, wrapped in fine linen, is a child. To Ptolemy 15, Philopator Philometor Caesar, known to the people as Caesarion, Little Caesar, son of Julius Caesar, son of Cleopatra. To Egypt, he is the living heir of two worlds, the blood of Rome and the blood of the Pharaohs united in a single heartbeat. The crowd surges with cries of adoration, hands stretched toward the procession, prayers tumbling from dry lips. Mothers lift their children to see, elders bow their heads, merchants throw flowers into her path. For the Egyptians, this is not mere spectacle. It is divine affirmation. Isis has walked among them, and she has brought forth a son to guard the future. But not everyone sees a miracle. In the palace shadows, Roman officers watch the procession with narrowed eyes. In the smoke-filled halls of the Senate, far across the sea, men sharpen their tongues like knives. Word has already reached them. The dictator's Egyptian mistress has borne him a son named in his image, a son publicly declared the rightful heir to the thrones of both Rome and Egypt. It is an audacity that reeks of danger. For Cleopatra, it is more than a claim. It is a message. Every gesture in the parade is calculated, the gold glinting in the sun, the priests chanting blessings, the way Caesarion's face is turned toward the people, as though they might read the future in his features. She is weaving a story in which Egypt and Rome are not rivals, but bound by blood, and she is placing herself at the very center of that story. Inside the palace, she rules with the confidence of one who has survived fire and exile. She has rebuilt the harbor, reopened trade routes, and restored the temples desecrated during the war. She is careful to present herself not merely as Pharaoh, but as the embodiment of Egypt's ancient spirit, a living bridge between gods and mortals. Yet, she is equally skilled in the politics of Rome. Her letters to Caesar are written in a style that flatters and challenges him in equal measure. She sends gifts of rare scrolls, exotic animals, and Egyptian artisans to please his eye and remind him of her kingdom's wealth. She knows that while his legions may have secured her throne, It is her influence over him that keeps the Senate at bay, for now. But power is a fragile thing when it rests on the shoulders of men. In Rome, envy coils tighter with each whisper. Senators speak in the porticos about the Egyptian problem, masking their fears of Cleopatra's ambition behind talk of foreign corruption. Some murmur that Caesar has already crowned himself a king in all but name, and that his Egyptian queen dreams of ruling beside him. The paradox deepens. To the people of Alexandria, she is their savior, radiant and untouchable. To the Senate of Rome, she is a serpent winding herself into Caesar's legacy, poised to strike at the heart of their republic. Even within Egypt, the balance is delicate. The priests of certain temples look uneasily at the new imagery spreading through the land. Images of Cleopatra as Isis, holding Caesarion as Horus, blending Egyptian divinity with Roman blood. For some, it is heresy. For others, it is destiny. And Caesar himself? He seems to welcome the myth. During his visit to Alexandria, he appears beside her in public as though they are equals, something no Roman leader should do with a foreign monarch. In private, he spends long hours with her, discussing not only politics, but philosophy, astronomy, and the nature of power. They are two predators who have found in each other a reflection of their own hunger. But Caesar is not a man who belongs to one city, or even to one queen. Rome demands his return, and when the time comes, he sails away, leaving Cleopatra to rule alone once more. His departure is not a rupture, but a reminder. The eagle's wings stretch far, and its shadow falls where it chooses. In the months that follow, she leans fully into her role as living goddess. Public festivals in her honor grow more elaborate. She rides through the city on a golden barge, its prow carved in the shape of a falcon, musicians playing in the wake of her passing. She presides over ceremonies in temples lit with hundreds of oil lamps, their smoke curling into the air like offerings to the stars. And always, Caesarion is at her side, not hidden in the nursery, but displayed as the living proof of her bond with Rome. She knows that a child's image can be more powerful than an army's march. The people see in him the promise of stability. Her enemies see in him a threat they cannot yet touch. But in Rome, the knives are already being drawn. Senators who once tolerated Caesar's eccentricities now fear he will name Caesarion his heir, bypassing the line of Roman succession entirely. They begin to whisper of restoring the republic, of removing the dictator before his Eastern queen can place her son on both thrones. News of this reaches Cleopatra in fragments, rumors carried on merchant ships, letters smuggled by trusted agents. She reads them in the dim light of her private chambers, the perfume of lotus thick in the air. She understands the danger. A storm is forming across the Mediterranean, one that even her influence may not be able to turn aside. Yet she doesn't waver. If Rome's elite see her as a threat, then so be it. She has survived exile, war, and the burning of her city. She will survive this too. For now, she will continue to rule, to weave her legend, to bind her people's loyalty so tightly that no foreign blade can cut it loose. The Nile's floodwaters begin to recede, leaving behind fields fertile and black. The harvest will be good this year. The temples are full, the market's busy. On the surface, Egypt glitters as it has not in years. But Cleopatra knows that in Rome, the glitter hides the sharpening of steel. One evening, she stands on the balcony of her palace, Caesarion asleep in her arms. The harbor is quiet, the stars reflected in the dark water. Somewhere beyond that horizon, her lover walks the marble streets of a city that both exalts and despises him. She wonders if he senses, as she does, that the air before a storm is always the calmest. Soon, the wind will shift, and the tide will carry news that will shake both Rome and Alexandria, the sound of daggers in the heart of the Senate. Rome smells of spring that morning. Damp marble, blooming laurel, the faint sweetness of wine spilled from last night's feast. The Forum is alive with footsteps and voices, merchants hawking their wares under the pale sun. But in the Curia of Pompey, the air is different, still, waiting. Inside, the Senate gathers in the cool shadow of columns, their white togas pooling like bleached waves on the marble floor. Julius, Caesar arrives as he always does, head high, eyes scanning, lips carrying the faint trace of a smile that could mean everything or nothing. Around him, the senators shift and murmur, their greetings thick with honey. Then the first blade strikes. It comes from the side, a quick, bright flash in the dim hall. Then another, and another. A flurry of steel, 23 plunges into flesh, muscle, and bone. The sound is not of metal alone. It is the wet, tearing gasp of a body failing. Caesar stumbles, his blood spilling dark across the marble, pooling like a second toga around his feet. He turns, perhaps to speak, perhaps to curse, and meets the eyes of Brutus. No words pass between them, only the final exhale. The man who held the fate of empires in his grasp collapses at the foot of Pompey's statue, his lifeblood soaking into the stone. Outside, the noise of the city goes on, ignorant of the moment that will shatter it. Far across the sea, in Alexandria, the tremor arrives not in sound, but in the slow, deliberate delivery of a message. Cleopatra receives it in her private chambers. The papyrus is creased, the ink hurried, the Latin terse. She reads it once, twice, 3 times. Julius Caesar, dictator, lover, protector, is dead, stabbed in the Senate by his own men. She feels no scream rise in her throat, no visible break in her composure, but beneath the stillness, the foundations of her world quake. She understands at once what this means. The shield she wore against Rome's ambition has been shattered. The palace windows are open, the air thick with the salt of the harbor. She moves to them slowly, the papyrus still in her hand, and looks out over the city. The streets are busy, the merchants loud, the sun burning on white stone, as if nothing has changed, but she knows everything has. Her mind turns to her son, Caesarion, the boy whose very name binds him to Rome's most dangerous legacy. In Egypt, he is the heir of Pharaohs. In Rome, he could be seen as the rightful successor to Caesar himself, or as the seed of treachery that must be cut down. The paradox is lethal. His claim is both the greatest hope for securing Egypt's future and the deadliest risk to his life. In the weeks that follow, word from Rome arrives in fragments, each piece more volatile than the last. The city has not descended into anarchy, not yet, but it teeters on the brink. The assassins call themselves liberators, claiming they have restored the Republic. Yet Caesar's death has not restored peace. Instead, a new power struggle begins, and 2 names rise above the rest: Marcus Antonius, Mark Antony, Caesar's loyal general, a man of charisma and appetite, beloved by the legions; Gaius Octavius, Octavian, Caesar's adopted heir, young, sharp, and underestimated by those who mistake youth for weakness. Between them lies the future of Rome, and Cleopatra knows she cannot remain untouched by their struggle. Egypt's survival depends on choosing the right ally, and choosing before the other decides she is an enemy. But who to trust? Antony, with his soldier's charm and his hunger for pleasure, might be swayed by flattery and alliance. Octavian, colder and more calculating, is less susceptible to seduction, but more likely to see the strategic value of Egypt's wealth. Cleopatra moves carefully. She strengthens her hold on Egypt first, fortifying Alexandria, securing the loyalty of the priesthood, ensuring the army is well fed and well paid. She does not mourn in the public streets. She mourns in the symbols she wears, the black linen in her chambers, the private rituals to honor the man who altered her life. But she does not romanticize the past. She knows Caesar was not hers alone. not in life and certainly not in death. His loyalty was never unconditional. His presence was both protection and chain. Without him, she is freer and far more exposed. In the Great Hall, she meets with her advisors under the painted gaze of the gods. Maps are unrolled, grain reserves tallied, fleets counted. Rome will come knocking again, and when it does, she must not open the door as a supplicant. She must meet them as an equal, or as close to one as Rome will allow. In the privacy of night, when the corridors fall silent, she walks the palace alone. The oil lamps flicker in the breeze from the open courtyards, casting long shadows against the carved walls. In those moments, she feels the ghost of Caesar walking beside her, not in tenderness, but as a reminder of what power demands. She recalls his lessons, spoken in moments between battles and banquets. Never fight on ground you did not choose. Never show the whole of your hand until you are ready to strike. And remember, the crowd that cheers you today will throw stones tomorrow. Now she carries those words as armor. Her thoughts drift again to her son. She imagines him older, taller, his features sharpening into the echo of his father's. Will the Romans see him as a bridge between worlds, or as the spark that could set them ablaze? By midsummer, the first envoys arrive, not from Antony or Octavian directly, but from men loyal to each. Their offers are veiled, their intentions cloaked in diplomacy. Each seeks Egypt's grain, its ships, its gold. Each promises friendship in return. Cleopatra listens, smiling faintly, offering vague assurances without committing. She knows better than to rush. Let Antony and Octavian bleed each other first. Let Rome exhaust itself in civil war. Then, when they are hungry for what only Egypt can provide, she will name her price. Still, danger creeps closer. Reports reach her of Roman whispers that Caesarion's existence is a threat to Octavian's claim. Some say he should be brought to Rome for his safety, a euphemism Cleopatra knows too well. Others speak more plainly. The boy should not live to challenge Caesar's adopted son. The queen's grip tightens on her cup as these words are repeated in her council chamber. The sound of gold against stone rings like a blade being drawn. She will not allow Rome to decide her son's fate. In the months ahead, Alexandria braces for the shifting tides of Rome's civil war. Cleopatra's ships are repaired and fitted for both trade and defense. Her spies travel the Mediterranean, carrying messages in code, bringing back whispers from distant ports. One evening, as the sun sinks behind the Pharaohs' lighthouse, staining the harbor red, Cleopatra stands on her balcony. The air is heavy, the sea dark. Somewhere out there, two men are gathering armies, and sooner or later, one of them will come to her. And when he does, she will be ready. For in the game of empires, the widow of Caesar is no mere piece on the board. She is a player, and her move is coming. The river Cydnus is calm that morning, its surface silvered by the pale light of early sun. The people of Tarsus gather along the banks, drawn by the rumors, whispers carried ahead of the wind, of a queen from Egypt who sails not to plead for mercy, but to ensnare a Roman general. Mark Antony waits upriver, leaning on the carved rail of the dock, a half smile tugging at his lips. A soldier's body, weathered and broad, a statesman's cloak thrown carelessly across his shoulders. His eyes are sharp, but there is a restless hunger in them. A hunger for pleasure, for spectacle, for the kind of stories that will outlive the men who tell them. Then, from the bend in the river, she appears. The barge glides into view like something conjured, not built. Its sails are deep crimson, glowing like fresh spilled wine in the morning light. The oars, plated in silver, dip into the water in perfect rhythm, each stroke catching the sun and sending flashes into the eyes of the crowd. From the deck, music drifts, flutes and lyres, slow and winding, twining through the air like incense. And there is incense. Clouds of perfume billow from braziers at the bow, carrying the scents of myrrh and cinnamon, heady and rich. The aroma drapes over the river like a spell, until the air itself seems warmer. At the center of the deck, beneath a canopy embroidered with gold thread, sits Cleopatra. She is dressed as Aphrodite, the goddess of love, a deliberate choice. Her gown, translucent in the sunlight, moves like water when she shifts. Gold dust clings to her skin, turning her into something luminous, unreal. At her feet, servants dressed as Eros attend to her, fanning her with peacock feathers, offering trays of fruit and wine. The crowd is silent. Even Antony, who has seen kings beg for his favor and queens dressed in their nation's finest, finds his breath caught in his throat. He expected a monarch. She arrives as a myth. The barge moors with practiced grace, and Cleopatra descends the gangplank without haste. Every step is measured, every turn of her head designed to catch the light and the eyes of her audience. When she reaches Antony, she does not bow. She extends her hand. The general takes it, and in that clasp, something unspoken passes between them. They dine that evening in her pavilion aboard the barge, a feast so lavish it borders on obscenity. Tables groan under roasted birds stuffed with figs, platters of oysters on beds of salt, grapes spilling from golden bowls. Musicians play in the background, their melodies shifting like the wind, alternately bright and somber. The air is thick with the mingled scents of wine, roasted meat, and the ever-present perfume. Antony listens as Cleopatra speaks. Her voice is low but carries, the kind of voice that makes every man at the table feel she is speaking only to him. She tells stories of Egypt, of temples that breathe the prayers of the gods, of deserts that sing under the moon, of a river that rules the lives of its people as surely as any pharaoh. She speaks of politics too, with a sharpness that cuts through the haze of wine. She knows Rome's game. She knows Octavian's ambition. And she knows Antony is the only man in the empire who can stand against him. Antony, already intoxicated by the spectacle, begins to see the strategy beneath it. Cleopatra offers him more than beauty. She offers him a kingdom rich in grain, gold, and ships, the lifeblood of any campaign. She offers him loyalty, in a time when loyalty in Rome is traded like coin. She offers him the chance to outshine Octavian, not just in the Senate, but in the annals of history. Their alliance is sealed not in ink, but in the slow intertwining of hands over the banquet table, in the lingering of eyes across candlelight, in the laughter that rings too easily between them. But love in politics is a double-edged sword. Cleopatra knows this. She has seen how passion can blind, how it can make men reckless. Antony knows it too, but in her presence, the knowledge dulls. Together, they become a spectacle the world can't look away from. In the weeks that follow, they remain in Tarsus, the city turning into a stage for their union. They hunt together in the mornings, dine on the river at noon, and host banquets at night that last until the stars fade. They gamble, they drink, they play games of wit and dare. Antony, the seasoned general, finds himself losing more than he wins, and enjoying it. The people talk. Rome talks louder. Octavian hears the whispers, each one feeding his picture of Antony as a man seduced, distracted, weakened by a foreign queen. It is the beginning of a campaign that will one day destroy them both. But for now, the present belongs to them. Cleopatra sails back to Alexandria with Antony beside her. The return is another performance. Crimson sails billowing, silver oars flashing, music and perfume drifting over the harbor. To her people, she has not only reclaimed her throne, but brought with her a Roman protector of unmatched power. To Antony's soldiers, the queen is no mere consort. She is a force, a ruler in her own right. a woman who can stand eye to eye with their commander. In the palace, their days blur into nights. Cleopatra shows Antony the treasures of Egypt, the columns of Karnak, the temples along the Nile, the tombs of the kings. She teaches him the language of her people, the rhythms of their festivals, the rituals of their gods. In turn, he brings her tales of Roman battles, of legions marching across mountains, of the Senate's intrigues. Yet beneath the feasts and laughter, the politics never sleep. Cleopatra ensures that Egypt's grain shipments are directed to Antony's allies. Antony arranges for Roman protection along Egypt's trade routes. Each gift they give each other is both personal and strategic, and always Octavian waits. The young heir watches from Rome as the two most charismatic figures in the Eastern Mediterranean build a world in which his authority is an afterthought. Publicly, he is silent. Privately, he begins to sharpen his blade, not the steel of the soldier, but the weapon of the politician. For now, Antony and Cleopatra do not care. Their bond is more than lust, more than alliance. It is the intoxicating belief that together they can remake the world in their image. On the banks of the Nile, under a sky heavy with stars, they stand side by side, the river's current whispering at their feet. The air is thick with the scent of lotus, the sound of distant music drifting from the city. Antony lifts his cup to her, and she to him. Two rulers, one ambition, one love, one inevitable fall. And somewhere in the shadows of the future, the drums of war begin to beat. Soon, the games of pleasure will give way to the games of empire. And in those, the stakes are measured not in gold or grain, but in blood. The knights in Alexandria no longer sleep. They blaze. From the palace windows, light pours into the darkness, spilling gold across the marble courtyards and onto the harbor's black water. Music threads through the air. The bright chatter of lyres, the deep hum of drums, the bright metallic ring of laughter. The scent of roasting meats mingles with the perfume of lotus and myrrh, drifting over the city until even the common folk can taste the distant promise of feasting. Inside the great hall, the world has been remade in excess. Golden couches, soft with crimson cushions, stretch along the banquet tables. Platters of peacocks roasted whole, their feathers painted with gold leaf, are carried in on the shoulders of sweating servants. Bowls overflow with pomegranates, figs, and dates so ripe they split under their own weight. Amphorae of wine are tilted until the marble floors are slick with purple. This is the court of Antony and Cleopatra, a kingdom of indulgence. They do not feast quietly. They revel with the conviction of people who believe the night will never end. The air hums with the heat of bodies pressed close in conversation, with the clink of goblets, with the murmur of courtiers competing for the ear of their queen and her Roman consort. Musicians play until their fingers ache. Dancers spin until the jewels in their hair scatter across the floor. And at the center of it all sit the hosts, two rulers, two thrones, two crowns. Cleopatra reclines like a goddess, her hair braided with gold, her wrists heavy with bracelets that catch the torchlight and scatter it like sparks. Beside her, Antony leans forward, broad and flushed, his soldier's hands gripping a goblet as if it were the hilt of a sword. Their laughter moves like fire through the hall, igniting more toasts, more stories, more excess. On one infamous night, Cleopatra issues a challenge. She boasts she can host the most expensive banquet in history. Antony, grinning, accepts. The evening begins as all their feasts do, with music, with wine, with dishes that glisten under layers of honey and spice. But when the final course is brought, there is nothing on the plates but goblets of vinegar. The courtiers murmur in confusion. Cleopatra lifts a hand, removes a pearl earring the size of a dove's egg, and drops it into the vinegar. The acid eats away at the gem, dissolving it into a pale opalescent swirl. Without hesitation, she raises the goblet to her lips and drinks. Gasps ripple through the hall. Antony roars with laughter. The pearl, worth a fortune that could feed thousands, is gone in a single swallow. The story will travel from Alexandria to Rome, carried on the tongues of merchants and diplomats, each retelling more extravagant than the last. To their followers, these feasts are not waste. They are proof. Proof that Egypt's coffers are full, that their rulers stand untouchable, that life under Antony and Cleopatra is a life of abundance. In a world where famine and war are constant companions, such displays feel like a shield against the darkness beyond the palace walls. But to Rome, it is scandal. In the marble halls of the Senate, Octavian seizes on the stories. He paints Cleopatra not as a queen, but as a sorceress, a foreign temptress who has wrapped Antony in chains of lust and gold. He describes her as a woman who would drain Rome's wealth to feed her banquets, who whispers treason into Antony's ear between cups of wine. The image spreads. In the streets of Rome, where hunger gnaws and coins grow scarce, hatred festers. People speak of Antony as a man bewitched, no longer a general of Rome, but a puppet of the East. The whispers harden into conviction. Cleopatra does not want alliance. She wants empire. Octavian's agents spread darker rumors still. They say Cleopatra dreams of moving Rome's seat of power to Alexandria, of crowning Caesarion not just as pharaoh, but as ruler of Rome itself. They speak of her as if she is a shadow over the Tiber, ready to blot out the sun. Antony, for his part, does little to quiet the talk. He wears Egyptian robes in public. He participates in Alexandria's festivals as though he were born to them. He grants land and titles in the eastern provinces without consulting the Senate, strengthening Cleopatra's hand as much as his own. The two even form a society known as the Inimitable Livers, a circle of companions devoted to nothing but pleasure, extravagance, and games of wit. Membership is limited, the cost of admission measured in wealth and daring. Nights with the Inimitable Livers blur into dawn, the line between politics and indulgence dissolving in rivers of wine. But outside the palace walls, the world is shifting. Octavian consolidates his power in Rome, quietly dismantling Antony's influence in the Senate. In the provinces loyal to him, he tightens his grip on supply lines, ensuring that every shipment of grain or gold from Egypt passes under Rome's watchful eye. Still, in Alexandria, the feasts continue. Cleopatra knows the danger, but she also knows the power of spectacle. A ruler who appears weak invites rebellion. A ruler who appears invincible, who can drink pearls and waste fortunes without blinking, sends another message entirely. I will not fall. Yet, even as the music swells and the dancers whirl, there are cracks in the gold. Some courtiers whisper of Octavian's growing army. Others notice the way Antony's letters from Rome grow shorter, more urgent, more strained. The feasts become a defiance, a refusal to acknowledge the shadow creeping toward them. One night, as the last guests stagger from the hall and the fires burn low, Cleopatra stands alone on the balcony. Below, the harbor is still, the masts black against the moonlit water. She can smell the salt and the faint smoke of torches on Roman ships anchored too close to her city. Behind her, Antony approaches, the scent of wine heavy on his breath. He wraps an arm around her, his voice low. He speaks of war, not in the distant future, but soon. Octavian will not be content with words. The feast is ending. The table will be cleared for battle. Cleopatra says nothing. She looks out over the dark waters and imagines it aflame, as it had been once before in her life. She thinks of the pearl she drank, of how quickly something precious can vanish. And she knows the next course in this feast will be blood. The wine has soured, not in the cups, but in the air between Antony and Cleopatra. The feasts are fewer now. the laughter brittle, the hall's golden glow replaced with the cold gleam of polished bronze and sharpened steel. Alexandria hums not with music, but with the groan of shipbuilders, the clatter of weapons, the hiss of pitch boiling in iron cauldrons. War is no longer a distant threat whispered over goblets. It has arrived. Octavian's propaganda has done its work. Rome sees Antony as a traitor, Cleopatra as the witch who bewitched him. The Senate grants Octavian the moral high ground. His fleets gather like storm clouds across the Ionian Sea. Antony and Cleopatra answer with their own armada, 200 warships, their hulls heavy with Egyptian grain, their decks bristling with soldiers loyal to the lover's cause. The decision is made. They will meet Octavian at Actium. The morning of battle is cold, the sky a dull gray lid over the water. On Cleopatra's flagship, the smell of salt is almost masked by the stench of pitch, thick and tarry, ready to feed the fire that will consume enemy ships. The decks creak under the weight of bronze rams, rows of archers, and the great wooden towers bristling with spears. From her position on the high stern, Cleopatra surveys the horizon. The sea ahead is a restless, slate-colored plain, broken only by the distant black smudges of Octavian's fleet. To her right, Antony's flagship mirrors hers in size and magnificence. A pair of predators poised to strike. The signal horns sound low and mournful, and the oars dip in unison. The fleets move. The first impact is not steel on steel, but the roar of flaming projectiles hurled across the waves. They streak through the air like meteors, trailing smoke before smashing into decks and sails. The sea erupts with shouts, with the splintering of wood, with the animal panic of men leaping into the water to escape the fire crawling over their ships. The air grows thick, with the reek of burning pitch, the metallic tang of blood, the salt spray driven by the frantic churn of oars. The horizon becomes a chaos of masts and smoke, the water littered with wreckage, and the thrashing bodies of the drowned and the drowning. Antony's tactics are aggressive, his ships ramming hard into the enemy line. For a moment, it seems as if they might break through. But Octavian's fleet, smaller and more maneuverable, circles like wolves, cutting into the heavier vessels and trapping them. On Cleopatra's deck, a messenger stumbles toward her, his tunic scorched, his face blackened with soot. Antony's center is faltering, he says. The wind has turned against them. Their ships are caught in a deadly crescent, pinned between Octavian's rams and the shallows. Cleopatra knows what happens to the losers in a Roman civil war. They are not spared. They are paraded, humiliated, strangled in some dark chamber. Their cities are looted, their people enslaved, and Egypt, her Egypt, would become Rome's prize. She makes her choice. The signal is given. Her flagship turns, its great oars biting into the sea. The crimson sails snap taut as the wind catches them. The prow swings away from the melee toward the open water. From Antony's deck, the sight is unmistakable. The Queen of Egypt is retreating. Some will say later she acted out of fear, that her courage failed her. Others will say it was calculation, that she intended to preserve her ships and treasure for the war's next chapter. Whatever the truth, the effect is the same. Antony sees her fleeing and, in that instant, chooses to follow. It is the moment that seals their fate. He orders his own flagship to break off, pulling free from the fight with the straining of oars and the shouts of men confused, then furious. His captains watch in disbelief as their commander turns away from victory, or at least from an honorable death, to follow a woman into the horizon. Behind them, their fleet collapses. Leaderless, hemmed in, Antony's ships are taken one by one. Some are boarded and seized, their crews cut down. Others are set ablaze, left to burn to the waterline before sinking in a hiss of steam. The sea at Actium becomes a grave, the smoke rising in black pillars, visible for miles. By the time the sun begins to sink, the battle is over. Octavian's fleet holds the water, the wreckage of Antony's ships drifting among the corpses. The taste of ash and salt lingers in the wind. But Antony and Cleopatra are far from the carnage, their ships skimming southward, the coast of Greece falling away behind them. On Cleopatra's deck, the silence is suffocating. No music, no laughter, only the steady creak of timbers and the slap of waves against the hull. Antony comes aboard before nightfall. His face is carved from stone, his eyes dark with the knowledge of what they've lost. There are no accusations, no shouting. Only a look, part disbelief, part resignation, passing between them. In that look, the truth hangs unspoken. The war is not over, but the tide has turned. Octavian will follow. Rome will follow. And next time, there will be nowhere left to run. They sail for Egypt, not in triumph, but in flight. The harbors of Alexandria welcome them with torches, but even the glow of home cannot mask the shadow that now trails them. Word of Actium will travel faster than their ships. The people will hear of their retreat. Their enemies will call it cowardice. Their allies will begin to drift away, sensing the shift in the wind. The glittering days of feasts and crimson sails are gone. What awaits them now is siege, starvation, and the slow closing of the noose. That night, as Cleopatra stands alone on the deck, she looks back over the black water. Somewhere beyond the horizon lies Actium, the place where they lost not just a battle, but the illusion that they could shape Rome's destiny. The air is cold, smelling of salt and smoke, and the stars seem far too distant. She wraps her cloak tighter and turns toward the lights of Alexandria, burning faint and fragile against the dark. The eagle has tasted blood, and it will not stop until it has claimed the Nile itself. The sound reaches the city before the sight does. A low, relentless rumble, like distant thunder rolling across the desert. But there is no rain coming, only dust. Octavian's legions march on Alexandria. From the high towers of the palace, Cleopatra's sentries watch as the horizon darkens with movement. Standards crowned with golden eagles bob above the haze, the sun catching on helmets and spearheads until the whole army glitters like a river of metal flowing toward the sea. Alexandria's white marble walls, once a vision of peace and prosperity, now glare in the burning sun like the exposed bones of a great animal awaiting the vultures. The Pharaohs lighthouse still sends its steady beam across the harbor, but in the streets below, shadows are lengthening, not from the setting sun, but from the weight of fear. Inside the gates, the city tightens, markets grow silent, the smell of fresh bread vanishes, replaced by the sour tang of grain measured in handfuls, doled out by soldiers at checkpoints. The fishmongers' stalls stand empty. The harbor is choked with blockades. The sea that once brought Alexandria its lifeblood now carries only Roman warships. Famine does not arrive all at once. It creeps in, at first stealing the luxuries, then the staples, then the things you never thought you'd eat. In the poorer quarters, families boil leather straps for broth. In the palace kitchens, the peacocks and figs of the feasts are long gone. The cooks whisper as they stretch the dwindling stores, knowing there will be nothing left to stretch soon. Cleopatra walks the corridors of her palace, and though the gold still gleams, it feels colder under her fingers. The gardens are quiet, the pools still. Even the wind through the colonnades carries the acrid bite of burning oil from the city walls. Antony is not the man he was when he first sailed into Alexandria's harbor, his armor gleaming, his voice full of conquest. He spends his days in the strategy chambers, hunched over maps that promise nothing but narrowing escape routes. His soldiers still salute him, but the glint in their eyes is gone, replaced by the dull reflection of men who know they are fighting for a cause already lost. In the nights, when the city is quiet except for the distant scrape of pickaxes and the low murmur of watchmen, Cleopatra stands on her balcony. She watches Antony drink alone in the courtyard below, the torchlight trembling in the wine as he lifts it to his lips. The man who had once been a bulwark against Octavian's ambition now looks like a figure already half-carved into marble. Outside the walls, the siege tightens. Octavian's forces dig in, their camps spreading like a rash across the desert's edge. The legionaries move with mechanical precision. The clank of armor, the rasp of shovels, the steady building of siege engines. They are not in a hurry. Time is their ally. Hunger is their weapon. Inside, Cleopatra prepares her final fortress. At the heart of the palace complex lies her mausoleum, a structure of polished stone, its walls lined with treasures, its chambers filled with tapestries, gold, and fine linen. To the outside world, it is a tomb for the queen's eventual rest. To Cleopatra, it becomes something else entirely, a citadel. The entrance is fortified. Guards loyal only to her are posted at the doors. Supplies are moved discreetly inside. Water jars, dried dates, sacks of grain, chests of coins and boxes of the most precious relics of Egypt's past. Scrolls from the library, amulets from the Valley of the Kings, statues of the gods, all hidden away behind the mausoleum's heavy stone doors. It is not the first time Cleopatra has been forced into a fortress, but this time she knows it will be the last. She keeps up appearances in the palace, receiving envoys, speaking to the city's leaders, promising that Alexandria will hold. But in private, she speaks less of victory and more of legacy. She instructs scribes to record her reign, not only the triumphs, but the trials. She ensures that Caesarion, her son, is kept far from the worst of the city's suffering, though she knows that in Octavian's eyes, the boy's very existence is a threat. The days blur into one another, marked only by the tightening ration lines and the steady approach of the Roman siege towers. The city's defenders grow gaunt. Their armor hangs loose on their frames. In the alleys, the dead are carried away quietly, wrapped in whatever cloth can be spared. The Nile, once a symbol of abundance, runs past the city walls like an indifferent witness. In the council chamber, Antony argues for a final sortie, a desperate charge to break the Roman lines. His commanders listen, but their silence speaks louder than their words. Cleopatra watches him as he speaks, the fire still flickering in his voice, and wonders if it is for the city's sake or for his own honor. She knows that Octavian is not merely at the gates of Alexandria. He is at the gates of their lives. And when he enters, it will not be as a conqueror willing to negotiate, but as an executioner with a list of names. One evening, as the sun bleeds into the horizon, Antony comes to her. His eyes are shadowed, his voice low. He tells her the defenses will not hold another month. Octavian's troops are too many, their supplies too deep, their patience too endless. He speaks of the shame of defeat, the dishonor of capture. Cleopatra listens, her face still. She has no illusions left about what the future holds. That night, she orders her most trusted servants to move more treasure into the mausoleum. The corridors echo with the scrape of heavy chests dragged across stone, the muted clink of gold and silver inside. To the guards who watch the procession, it is as if the queen is burying herself alive, surrounding her final refuge with the wealth of a kingdom that will soon belong to someone else. The siege grinds on. Days stretch like years. The marble streets are streaked with ash from the constant burning of whatever can be used for heat and cooking. The once bustling harbor lies silent, Roman ships blocking the horizon like a wall of black sails. Cleopatra retreats more and more to the mausoleum, not out of fear, but out of inevitability. She walks its halls as if committing them to memory, touching the carved reliefs, breathing in the cool air trapped within the stone. She knows this place will outlast her, even if her empire does not. From the high window in her private chamber, she watches the city that has been her crown. Alexandria, still beautiful in the fading light, but ringed with fire. She can hear the faint, steady thud of Roman siege engines testing their range. Somewhere beyond those walls, Octavian waits, patient, calculating, certain. In the palace, Antony drinks deeper, speaks less. The man who had once stood like a wall against the tide is now watching the water rise. And Cleopatra, the woman who once danced between empires, feels the tide pulling her too. The end is near, but not yet. Not while there is still a breath left to draw, a choice left to make. For Cleopatra knows that in Rome's eyes, the manner of her death will matter almost as much as her life, and she intends to write the final act herself. It begins with a whisper that slides like a shadow through the streets of Alexandria, winding through the camps of the weary defenders, slipping past the palace gates. The queen is dead. No one can say who first spoke it, or how the lie was planted. But in a city under siege, where rumor moves faster than truth, it spreads like fire. By the time it reaches the ears of Mark Antony, it has grown teeth. The queen has taken her own life. The mausoleum is sealed. The heart of Egypt has stopped beating. Antony is standing in a dim chamber when the words are spoken. The air is thick with the smell of oil lamps and the faint sourness of wine spilled the night before. Around him, maps lie scattered like the bones of a carcass picked clean. He stares at the messenger, the words sinking into him like ice. His first breath after hearing them is not a gasp, but a low, shuddering exhale, the sound of a man whose last tether to this world has been cut. He does not rage, he does not weep, he simply turns to his sword. The weapon has been with him through years of war, the steel worn smooth by his grip, the hilt darkened with sweat and blood. He kneels, pressing the blade's point to his belly. The chamber is silent, but for the faint hiss of the lamp flame. "Remember me," he says, though it is unclear to whom. To the gods, to Rome, to her. And then he falls forward. The sound is muffled, the blade sliding in with a wet, sickening inevitability. His breath bursts out in a ragged cry as the pain flares white-hot, then dulls. Blood pools beneath him, darkening the pale marble floor, spreading outward like a slow eclipse. He does not die quickly. The body clings stubbornly to life, even when the mind is ready to let go. Servants rush in, their sandals slipping in the blood, their cries echoing off the walls. One of them shouts, "The queen is alive. The lie is undone, but too late." Antony's eyes flicker open at the words, confusion cutting through the haze of pain. Alive? She is alive? Then he wants, no needs, to see her. Word is sent to the mausoleum. Inside, Cleopatra is in council with her most loyal attendants, the air heavy with incense, meant to cover the staleness of confinement. When she hears the message, her face remains still, but her voice is urgent. She will see him. The problem is the wall she has built around herself. The mausoleum is a fortress against Octavian, but now it is also a prison against the man she loves. Antony cannot walk. The wound has drained him of nearly all strength. There is only one way. From the high window of the mausoleum, ropes are lowered, silken cords that sway in the dry breeze. Below, Antony is bound in sheets, his blood soaking through the fabric. Soldiers and servants lift him carefully, grunting with the strain as they begin to haul him upward, inch by inch, toward the woman waiting above. The city watches. From the streets and rooftops, people crane their necks, seeing their once great general swaying helplessly in midair, the ropes creaking under his weight. The sun is merciless, its light turning the blood on the sheets a deep, searing black. Cleopatra leans from the window, her hands gripping the sill so tightly her knuckles whiten. She calls down to him, her voice raw, half command, half plea. The ropes pull him higher, the men hauling him straining against gravity and the weight of defeat. At last, Antony is pulled into the chamber. The sight is worse than she imagined. His skin is ashen, his breath shallow, the wound in his belly weeping dark blood. The scent of it, iron and salt, mixes with the cloying sweetness of the incense, making the air heavy enough to choke on. She kneels beside him, gathering his head into her lap. Her hands, always so sure, tremble as she touches his face. The marble floor beneath them is streaked with blood and wine from the overturned amphorae. The chamber is quiet, except for the labored rasp of his breathing. For a moment, they are no longer a queen and a general, no longer the rulers of half the known world. They are simply two people who have spent their lives at war, with others, with empires, with fate, and have lost. She speaks to him in Greek, their private tongue, words that will never be recorded. Perhaps she tells him that she never betrayed him, that she will follow soon, that in some other place, the two of them will walk together without crowns or armies. He tries to answer, but the words are lost in a gurgle of breath. His hand twitches, reaching for her. She takes it, pressing it to her lips. The light in the chamber dims as the sun slips behind a veil of smoke from the burning districts. Shadows lengthen on the walls, creeping toward them like the tide. And then, with one last breath, a shudder that seems to pass through both their bodies, Mark Antony is gone. Cleopatra closes his eyes. Her face does not crumble. The grief is there, but it is locked behind the same steel that has carried her through exile, through war, through betrayal. She will not give Octavian the satisfaction of seeing her break, but the chamber still feels smaller now, the walls closing in around her. The scent of death lingers in the air, clinging to her skin, her hair, her robes. Outside, the Romans wait. Octavian knows she is inside. He knows Antony is dead, and he knows that soon the queen will have to face him, not as the ruler of Egypt, but as a prisoner in chains. Cleopatra rises. She orders that Antony be prepared for burial with the honors of a king. She will not let him be paraded through Rome as a trophy. She instructs her attendants to bring fresh incense, to wash the blood from the floor, to restore the room's dignity before the conqueror arrives. But inside, she is already turning toward her final act. For Cleopatra understands the truth. Octavian does not want her alive because he respects her. He wants her alive so that she can be displayed, a broken queen walking in chains through the streets of Rome. That she will never allow. Her eyes drift toward the sealed inner chamber of the mausoleum, where treasures lie waiting, where secrets are kept, where death can be made into a weapon. Mark Antony has fallen. Cleopatra remains, but the path left to her is narrowing with every heartbeat, and beyond the gates of the city, Octavian sharpens not his swords, but his plans. For the Queen of Egypt will be his greatest prize. The next chapter will not be about battle. It will be about how a woman turns the moment of her defeat into the only kind of victory she has left. The mausoleum is quiet now. Too quiet. The body of Mark Antony has been prepared according to her orders, wrapped in fine linen, crowned with a golden circlet, guarded by priests who chant in low, sonorous voices. Outside, the city lies in the grip of Roman occupation. Boots tramp through Alexandria's marble streets, banners bearing the eagle of Rome snap in the dry wind, and the scent of burning cedar from Octavian's victory camp curls through the air like an omen. Cleopatra stands in the doorway of her chamber, gazing out toward the harbor where Roman ships gleam like rows of unsheathed blades. Her attendants wait behind her, silent, watching for a command. None comes. She knows what must happen next. A meeting. A reckoning. Octavian has summoned her. It is midday when she leaves the mausoleum. The sun is cruel, beating down upon the white stone of Alexandria until the air ripples with heat. The streets are lined with Roman soldiers, their bronze armor glinting, their faces as hard as the steel at their sides. The people of Egypt, the ones who dare to watch, bow their heads as she passes, not in shame, but in grief. Their queen walks toward her conqueror. She is dressed in state, not in mourning black, but in a gown of deep lapis blue, the color of the Nile at dusk. Around her neck coils a necklace of gold and emeralds, shimmering like sunlight on water. Her hair is braided and crowned with the uraeus, the rearing cobra of the Pharaohs, its jeweled eyes glittering. Every step she takes is deliberate. She will not go to Octavian as a prisoner. She will go as the last pharaoh of Egypt. The meeting takes place in the great hall of the palace, now occupied by Rome's new master. Octavian sits upon a carved chair that is not a throne but might as well be, for the way his soldiers stand at attention around him. His face is a mask, young, smooth, unreadable. He is not like Caesar. He has none of that man's charm, none of his easy humor. His power is colder, sharper, like a blade fresh from the forge. Cleopatra enters without bowing. There is a silence, heavy as stone. "Queen of Egypt," Octavian says at last, his tone flat. "Caesar of Rome," she replies. The title is not yet his, but the words are chosen to stroke ambition. Even in defeat, she plays the game. They speak in Latin, the language of the empire that now holds her fate. Cleopatra's voice is calm, her eyes steady. She asks, not for her life, but for her legacy. "My children," she says, "spare them. Let them live, though their kingdom is gone." Octavian studies her for a long moment. The hall is so quiet that the rustle of a Roman standard in the breeze outside seems deafening. "They will live, so," he says, "if you live. In Rome." The words are a trap, wrapped in the velvet of mercy. Rome's promise of life is not life at all. It is survival in chains, survival as a spectacle, survival as a humiliation. Cleopatra knows what awaits her there. The jeering crowds, the triumph parade, the slow stripping away of dignity until she is nothing more than a curiosity to be pitied. "And my burial?" she asks. "I will not be displayed. I will not be unshrouded before the mob." Octavian's gaze hardens. "That is not for you to decide." In that moment, the truth settles between them like a shadow. There will be no bargain, no peace, no dignity. Octavian will take Egypt, take her children, take her body, and make her one more jewel in Rome's crown. Cleopatra inclines her head slightly, as though accepting the verdict. But inside, something shifts. The decision is made. Not here, not aloud, but in the quiet chambers of her mind where no Roman can reach. She leaves the hall with the same poise she entered. To the soldiers, to the courtiers, to Octavian himself, she appears composed, perhaps even resigned. But the moment the palace gates close behind her, she gives the order to return to the mausoleum. That night, the city is unnervingly still. The moon hangs low over the harbor, turning the masts of Roman ships into a forest of silver spears. Inside the mausoleum, the air is thick with the mingled scents of lotus oil, burning myrrh, and the faint, ever-present tang of the sea. Cleopatra sits before a low table. Spread across it are the treasures of a lifetime: rings, bracelets, scrolls, a small golden statue of Isis, worn smooth by her touch. Her attendants, loyal to the last, stand in a half-circle around her. They know something is coming, though none dare to speak it aloud. Charmian, her most trusted servant, breaks the silence. "What did he say?" Cleopatra lifts her gaze. "He said Rome would have me." Charmian's lips press into a thin line. "Then they will not." The queen's eyes soften, but her voice is steel. "Prepare the chamber and send for the basket." The basket. To the Romans, it will be nothing more than a delivery. A gift of figs, perhaps, or some other token from the gardens along the Nile. But within it will be the instrument of her choosing, the final weapon she will wield against Octavian's designs. As preparations begin, Cleopatra moves through the mausoleum, touching the cool stone walls, the painted reliefs of gods and kings. She pauses before Antony's bier, her fingers brushing the linen shroud. For a moment, the mask of the queen slips and the woman beneath stands revealed, weary, grieving, alone. "You will not wait long," she whispers. Outside, Rome believes her broken. Octavian sleeps, knowing that his prize will be ready for the journey to Italy. But in the dark heart of the mausoleum, the last pharaoh of Egypt is making herself ready for a different voyage, one that no Roman can follow. Her attendants bring the basket. It is set upon the table, draped in a cloth. She does not look beneath it. Not yet. Instead, she orders wine, not the heavy red favored at Roman feasts, but a clear, fragrant vintage from the vineyards of the Delta. She drinks slowly, her fingers tracing the rim of the cup, her eyes fixed on the flicker of the oil lamps. This will be her triumph, not the one Octavian planned, but one of her own making. She will deny him the living trophy he craves, deny him the sight of her bowed in chains. In death, she will be ungoverned. In the hours before dawn, the mausoleum is lit only by the pale wash of moonlight through the high windows. Cleopatra sits, straight-backed, her gown falling in ripples of silk around her. Her attendants stand close, their faces pale but resolute. When she finally pulls back the cloth from the basket, the air seems to change. A faint movement within, the whisper of scales, the promise of release. She smiles, not with joy, but with the fierce satisfaction of a queen who, at last, holds the power of choice in her own hands. And in the distance, Octavian sleeps, unaware that the queen he believes he owns is already slipping beyond his reach. The night air in Alexandria is unnaturally still. It is the kind of stillness that feels like a held breath. The moment before the blade falls, before the tide breaks. Inside the mausoleum, oil lamps flicker along the walls, their flames bending in the faint draft from the high, narrow windows. The light dances over the painted images of ancient gods, Ra with his solar crown, Osiris with his green skin, Isis with her wings spread in eternal embrace. Cleopatra has chosen this chamber as the stage for her final act. She is dressed not in mourning, but in coronation splendor. A robe of pure white linen clings to her figure, bound at the waist with a golden belt. Her neck glitters with the broad collar of turquoise, lapis, and carnelian, the colors of the Nile and the desert and the blood of kings. Upon her head, the diadem gleams, the rearing cobra, Uraeus, watching with jeweled eyes. She is not preparing to die as a prisoner. She is preparing to die as pharaoh. On the low table before her rests the basket. To an unknowing eye, it is filled only with ripe figs, their skins split from the summer heat, releasing a faint, honeyed perfume into the air. But hidden among them is a coil of living muscle, smooth, scaled, and deadly. The asp. It is a creature as old as Egypt itself, worshipped and feared in equal measure. Its venom is swift, shutting down the body in a creeping tide from limb to heart. A Roman execution would be slow, humiliating. The asp is quick, royal. Cleopatra does not touch it yet. She moves instead to Antony's bier, where his body lies shrouded in linen. She places her hand over his heart, or where it once beat, and lingers there. In her mind, she sees the man he had been, the soldier whose laughter filled the palace halls, the lover who once believed the two of them could rule the world. "They will not parade me through Rome," she whispers to him, "and they will not take me from you." Her two most trusted attendants, Charmian and Iris, stand near the wall, their faces pale but resolved. They have served her through battles, banishments, and triumphs, and now they will serve her through this last passage. Cleopatra turns to them. "Are you ready?" Iris nods. Charmian closes her eyes in assent. There is no hesitation. They know the cost of loyalty, and they have chosen it willingly. Cleopatra sits upon the couch in the center of the chamber. Her movements are slow, deliberate, as if each one is part of a ritual. And in a way, it is. Death for her is not surrender. It is a final negotiation with the gods, a sealing of her legend before Rome can corrupt it. Her fingers part the figs. The serpent shifts, disturbed by the light, its scales catching the glow of the oil lamps in rippling shades of bronze and green. For a moment, its head lifts, tongue flickering, tasting the air. She smiles. The asp is small, no longer than a man's forearm, but in its jaws lies enough poison to kill an army's worth of rats. She reaches in without fear and draws it out, cradling it as one might a delicate ornament. Its body winds slowly across her forearm, muscles cool and sinuous against her skin. "Beautiful creature," she murmurs. "We share the same nature, to be feared, to strike when cornered." Her eyes close for a heartbeat. She pictures Rome, the jeering crowds, the chains biting into her wrists, Octavian's cold gaze as she is forced to kneel before him. The thought is enough to banish any final doubt. With a smooth motion, she brings the serpent to her breast. The asp's head tilts, and then, swift, precise, the strike. A sharp pinch, almost nothing. Then the burn. The venom begins its silent journey through her blood, winding toward her heart like a black river. Her breath hitches. Her fingers tighten briefly in the folds of her robe, then loosen. She leans back against the cushions, the asp slipping from her grasp onto the couch, where it coils again, its work done. Charmian steps forward. She kneels beside her queen, pressing her forehead briefly to Cleopatra's hand before taking the serpent herself. Iris follows. There is no cry, no protest, only the faintest gasp as each feels the bite. The chamber grows warmer, the air heavier, as the venom steals strength from their limbs. Cleopatra's vision begins to blur at the edges, as though the walls are melting into the dark. Yet she feels no fear, only release. Her final thoughts are not of Octavian, nor of Rome, but of the Nile at dawn, the call of ibises across the water, the scent of papyrus in the summer wind. She has ruled, she has loved, she has fought, and now she will choose her own ending. By the time the first Roman soldiers burst into the mausoleum, drawn by reports of strange movements within, the scene is already frozen in death's stillness. Cleopatra lies upon her couch, her head resting to one side, her expression serene. In her hand is a single fig, as if she had simply been eating when sleep overtook her. At her feet, Iris slumps against the couch. Charmian, still upright, is smoothing the folds of her queen's robe when a soldier shouts at her. "This is well done," she says faintly, and collapses beside Cleopatra. The serpent is nowhere to be found. Some say it slipped into the shadows. Others claim it was hidden by the attendants so that Octavian could not display it like a trophy. The truth is swallowed by the silence of the tomb. When Octavian arrives, it is too late. The prize he had wanted most, Cleopatra alive, paraded in chains through the streets of Rome, has slipped from his grasp. He stands over her body, the lamplight catching the gold of her diadem, and for a moment, his mask falters. He has won Egypt, but he has lost the one thing he could not conquer, her will. "Bury her with Antony," he orders at last. Perhaps it is respect, perhaps it is calculation. The people of Alexandria will see them together in death, as they had been in life, and the image will soften the edges of conquest. But Octavian knows, as do the soldiers who carried the news, as will the chroniclers who write it down, that this was not his victory, it was hers. Beyond the walls of the city, the Nile flows on, indifferent to the passing of queens and conquerors. The papyrus sways in the wind. The ibis still calls across the marshes. And somewhere in the sands of memory, a serpent slips quietly back into legend, leaving behind the story of a woman who, in the final moments of her reign, struck the only blow Rome could not answer. But death, for Cleopatra, is not the end. In the centuries to come, her name will be reshaped, her face reinvented, her story told and retold, sometimes as a temptress, sometimes as a patriot, sometimes as a sorceress. And in every telling, the truth becomes harder to find. The tomb is sealed. Stone grinds against stone as the last block slides into place, muffling the lamplight, drowning the scent of incense in the cold breath of eternity. The air inside is heavy with the mingled perfumes of myrrh and lotus, offerings for the journey beyond. Outside, the murmurs fade. Soldiers stand in silence, their armor glinting in the Egyptian sun, watching as the queen's final resting place becomes part of the city's bones. With Cleopatra's death, the Ptolemaic dynasty, a line stretching back 3 centuries, is extinguished. The blood of Macedonian kings and Egyptian pharaohs pools into the dust. Antony's body lies beside hers, shrouded in linen, the two of them locked in a stillness that Octavian could never command in life. In the streets of Alexandria, life stirs again. Merchants open their stalls. Fishermen push out into the harbor. The city, that jewel of the Mediterranean, moves forward, but not without scars. Above the whispers of the crowd floats a single truth: Egypt is no longer its own. Octavian, soon to be Augustus, claims the Nile as Rome's. Its grain will feed his legions, its gold will line his coffers. The temples that once rang with hymns to Isis and Horus now echo with the clatter of Latin prayers to Jupiter. Statues of Greek gods are toppled, their faces smashed into the mosaic floors of their sanctuaries. The colossal pillars of the old world stand, but their meaning is stripped away, hollowed like shells. The goddess has been dethroned. The empire has come. But death is never the end for a queen who understood the alchemy of image. Cleopatra's shadow begins to stretch even as her body cools. In Rome, Octavian works quickly to seize control of her legacy. He cannot allow the people to remember her as a ruler, only as a warning. Pamphlets are whispered into the streets. Speeches are read aloud in the Forum. Cleopatra the harlot, Cleopatra the sorceress, Cleopatra the foreign temptress who ensnared 2 of Rome's greatest men and nearly stole their empire. The Senate nods, the people cheer, the myth takes root. Yet even as Rome paints her as a villain, others keep another vision alive. In Alexandria, behind shuttered doors, old priests and scholars speak her name with reverence. They recall the queen who walked among her people without an interpreter, who restored the temples, who poured grain into the bellies of the hungry during famine. To some, she is Isis reborn. To others, she is the last true pharaoh. To all, she is unforgettable. Time begins to work its strange magic. Centuries pass. The sands creep over Alexandria's palaces. The Nile shifts its course. The mausoleum's exact location is lost, swallowed by water or buried beneath stone. Rome falls, its marble temples crumbling into the earth. The Christian world rises, reshaping the past in its own image, and Cleopatra's name becomes more symbol than history. In the Middle Ages, she appears in illuminated manuscripts, a cautionary tale for kings about the dangers of lust and ambition. In the Renaissance, she is reborn in oil and gold leaf, reclining on silk couches, the asp at her breast painted as delicately as a jewel. By the time Shakespeare takes up her story, Cleopatra has become both woman and myth. Age cannot wither her, nor custom stale her infinite variety. She is dangerous, yes, but also magnificent, a figure too large for one lifetime. And still, the truth is elusive. Was she a seductress who wielded beauty like a dagger? A strategist who bent the strongest men of her age to her will? A patriot who fought to keep Egypt free from Rome's grasp? The answer, like the queen herself, refuses to be contained. She was all of these things, and none of them. She was a